Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 2, The Coming of the Mystery Schools, From What the Ancient Wisdom Expects of Its Disciples, by Manly P. Hall. The Coming of the Mystery Schools. Since earliest times, the belief in a superior and supreme being manifesting in totality, what man manifests only in part, has been the common property of human creatures. The mindless man, struggling up through the muck and mire of the Paleozoic fens, beat his hairy breast with long misshapen arms and raised his cry to an unknown God. Even the hairy anthropoids of today have certain rudiments of religious worship. Soulless but aware, they turn their half-formed faces to the sky and clasp their hands as though in prayer. No one knows whence came the spirit of worship, the great desire to express thankfulness for the mere privilege of existing, but it is as old as history. The first writings are of the gods. Probably the first buildings were temples, for we are realizing more day by day that every structure in nature is a sanctuary built without the voice of workmen or the sound of hammers. It is not only a sanctuary but also an altar. It is not only the altar but also the offering laid upon the altar. There is no voice, no people that does not bear witness to some God, some presence felt in the silence, some power seen in heaven. All human beings are divided into 4 general classes, but each one lives in only one part of himself, or rather he minimizes all other portions and emphasizes this one above the rest. The lowest of these divisions is the physical nature, and those who dwell therein are of the earth, earthy. They live only for the gratification of their physical natures. Their idea of heaven is a place where there is food, feasting, and little or no work. They are the Brahmanic Sudras, who, born in chains, are doomed to live and die in shackles of low organic quality. The very structure of the bones and flesh prohibits fineness in texture, either of body or soul. Their minds are only partly active. Their bodies resemble prisons more than dwelling places. They differ from the finer temperaments as the dray horse differs from the Arabian thoroughbred. Like the former, they live to labor, plodding along to a mediocre destiny. They are the laborers who must in truth earn their bread by the sweat of their brows. Give them opulence and they cannot retain it. Give them luxuries and they do not appreciate them. They are the dark, earthy ones who must ever bow before intelligence. They do not love God, for they cannot know Him. They are like the hairy anthropoids, raising their hands to unknown elements. The second division is made up of the artisans and those who labor both with mind and hand. They are the brown men of the Indian myth. They buy, sell, and exchange. To their basic dullness has been added a certain cunning and some intelligence. Having a mind, they control the mindless. They are the petty shopkeepers and those of a similar class who are gradually exchanging the labor of the hand for the labor of the head. Not having the mental organism with which to reason, they fill the places of worship, where thinking is done for them. They are the ones who allow their clergy to decide all spiritual problems for them, feeling themselves incapable of assuming the onus of heavy thinking. As a result, their ideas of eternity are rather abstract, and their credulity is utilized as a commercial asset by certain types of minds who consider it legitimate to capitalize on the ignorance of others. The third class is made up of the scientists. With microscope, telescope, and other apparatus still more complex, they attack the boundary lines of the known and wage war upon the limitless chaos. Those who wage this war in the cause of science are mostly concrete thinkers who follow as far as their instruments will lead them and then must wait for instruments still more powerful. Most of these minds are atheistic or at least agnostic. That is, of course, unless they have 2 standards, one to last 6 days in the laboratory and the other to be assumed Sunday morning in church. The miracles of theology are incapable of chemical analysis and are consequently taken cum grano salis by the scientific world. Therefore, the controversy between science and theology is bequeathed as a legacy to have and to hold upon that helpless posterity who come into the world to inherit the debate. The fourth and highest group embraces philosophers, musicians, and artists, all living in an abstract mental world surrounded by dreams and visions wholly unrecognizable by the other types. They have reached beyond the world of academic education to the world of creative idealism, which is at present the highest function of the human mind. This world is the dwelling place of genius, of invention, and of the things which lower mentalities can only accept but never analyze. Religiously, these minds are deistic. Most of them are monotheists, believers in one God. Many of them are mystics or occultists, and although possibly not yet sufficiently advanced to recognize their doctrines, yet belong to that finer type of mind capable of piercing the veil which divides the shadow from the substance. In all human nature, there is a certain expression of primitive instinct, with the desire for food which expresses the hunger of the material nature, and the desire for freedom which expresses the hunger of the intellectual nature, is also found that appreciation for the unknown, that aspiration which bears witness to the slumbering germ of a spiritual nature which somewhere in the constitution of all living things lies dormant and apparently lifeless. As soon as man was capable of thought, his mind turned upon himself. He sought to find a solution to the mystery of his own existence, which his unfolding intelligence was revealing to him in greater fullness every day. What am I? Why am I here? What lies beyond the horizon line of futurity? These were the great problems which confronted the primitive man, and these are also the great problems which confront the men and women of today. Religions have gradually been evolved as man sought to explain himself. Once they were few and simple, now they are many and complicated. This in itself shows the ever-unfolding faculty range of the human mind. The primitive man could count up to only the number of his own fingers. Since then, however, the human mind has conceived mathematics, and by this science can now deal in infinite computations of numbers with at least some degree of intelligence. The greatest proof of the evolution of the human mind is found in the development of man's handiwork. The hollowed log of the primitive savage has become the great steamship of today. This great development, which has gradually been brought about through the ages, is not the result of the miraculous transformation of natural substances, but the gradual growth of the human mind, which is molding all it contacts into ever more complicated forms as the result of its ever-increasing senses and functions. Religion is the outgrowth of many ages of spiritual hunger, when the soul of the primitive man, finding itself insufficient, turned in awe to the immensity of nature, in whose endless pageantry it saw a power far greater than itself. The savage turned to the winds and found in them something superior to himself. He trembled in fear at the voice of the thunder, fell prostrate in terror as great storms swept through the primitive world and volcanic craters belched forth red-hot stones and ashes. He offered sacrifice to the gods of the air that they should spare him. He cried from the tops of the mountains and offered incense to the stars. He could not find God anywhere, so offered sacrifice to him everywhere. He saw his crops burn for lack of water, his children sicken about him. His hopes were dashed to the ground by an unknown, unnamed thing which, though he could not understand, was the determining factor in every thought and action of his life. This was undoubtedly the origin of religion as man knows it. We remember the words of Pope, "Lo, the poor Indian, whose untutored mind sees God in clouds or hears him in the wind." Man is small, nature is great. Man is finite, nature is infinite. Man struggling against nature is like a tiny boat buffeted by the waves. In the endless grinding wheels of nature, ancient man recognized power. He realized that there was something greater than himself, a power that was supreme. He longed to exercise it, and through millions of years struggled like Hiawatha and the Maize King to extract from unknown power the secret of its greatness. Like Isis, he conjured Ra to tell his name and sought again and again to raise the veils of the world virgin. He found that some things which he did destroyed him, while others brought him happiness and peace. He sought to learn which was which and why, realizing that his very existence depended upon the wisdom of his choice. Finding at last that he could not master nature by force, he sought to master it through obedience. Our religious codes are largely the outcome of primitive experiments as the human mind, struggling for survival, gradually learned the will of nature and molded itself into that will. Today we are privileged to look back upon the history of the race and profit by the experience of the ages. Saints, sages, and saviors unnumbered have lived and died grappling with the problem of human destiny. The fruitage of their labors is preserved to us in the scriptures and philosophies of all nations. What are the so-called sacred books? Are they not merely the contributions to the knowledge of the world made by those who, devoting their lives to the problems of humanity and learning to solve them, have wandered alone yet unafraid in those causal worlds which man calls nature? Gradually, man has built the body or institution he calls religion. It is a mental temple, its dome upheld by a number of columns, each of these columns one of the faiths of men. The East, the West, the North, and the South have contributed either to the strength or the beauty of that structure. The entire building, however, is a material thing. It is the offering of man to the unknown. As the spirit enters the human body, when the embryo reaches a certain degree of unfoldment, so will the spirit of truth enter the religious body, when that structure has adequately prepared itself for such a coming. The world knows many religions, but nature has but one truth. All so-called faiths and doctrines are contributing to the knowledge of that one truth. All are expressing one ideal through a multitude of tongues. There is a babel on the earth, but there is only one voice in the heavens. All faiths are seeking to answer one question. What is the purpose of existence? Each answers it differently. When all are gathered together in their diversities, truth is established, for truth is the sum of all these things. Reality is all things unto all men. The ancient wisdom is the invisible spiritual side of religion, which quickens the body of religion. It is the one spirit which speaks through a multitude of tongues. It is that presence which enters in when its temple has been built by the body of its workmen. It vivifies the body of faith, making it alive and not merely a series of empty shells. Like the gods of India, it has many arms and many heads, but only one heart. In the very early period of human differentiation, man was incapable of self-government, but was ruled by those appointed by nature to preserve him and unfold him to the point when he would be capable of taking care of himself. We are told that when our solar system began its labors, spirits of wise beings from other solar systems came to us and taught us the ways of wisdom that we might have that birthright of knowledge which God gives to all his creations. It was these minds which are said to have founded the mystery schools of the ancient wisdom, for this wisdom was the knowledge of the will of nature for her children. The greatest art in all the world is the art of being natural, for that which is natural shall survive. For ages, religion has been founded upon a false hypothesis. It has sought to fill the world with miracles and unnatural things. It has sought to dictate and dogmatize. For this reason, it is failing. Religion is a body, but today it is a soulless body. It has not built its tabernacle according to the law. It is not serving intelligently and honestly the needs of the human race, but rather is involving itself and its members in endless dissensions of creed, doctrines, and codes, forgetting entirely the spirit of truth. As a result, one of the most important elements of human life is gradually removing itself from the world. And for lack of an honest, intelligent, fair-minded, and progressive religion, we have an age of extreme materialism when the God of man merely changes from a gilded figure of an unknown God to a gilded coin with distinctly practical uses. The ancient wisdom tells us that there is but one religion, and that its seed was planted in the souls of things with the beginning of the world. It became a mighty tree with its roots in heaven and its branches on earth, like the sacred banyan of India. As all the branches depend upon one trunk, so all faiths and religions depend upon one source, one light for all that they have been, are, or ever shall be. Some branches are large and strong, while others are small and weak, but through all of them courses one life. That life is light, and that light is the life of men. The ancient wisdom knows neither heathen nor Christian nor pagan. It recognizes only many branches on one tree, each branch in itself incomplete, but each part of the tree of faith. The tree asks nothing of the branches other than that they shall be true to the tree and bear true witness of the life coursing through the tree. The ancient wisdom is the life in the tree of faith. We do not see the life. We see only the leaves and branches which bear witness to the life, but in due season the miracle of the tree is accomplished. The life of the tree is glorified in the bud and in the flower. The life of the tree is consummated in the fruit of the tree. The glory of the life of that tree is in the new seed which bears full witness to the creative power of all that has gone before. This tree is indeed a tree of life, for without the higher and finer sentiments man does not live. He merely exists. If any branch of that tree does not bear fruit, the Master tells us that it shall be cut off and cast into the fire. It is the duty of all living things to produce some truly constructive labor as recognition of the divine life which is within them. God is most glorified when His children glorify His Spirit within themselves. In the remote past, the gods walked with men, and while the instructors from the invisible planes of nature were still laboring with the infant humanity of this planet, they chose from among the sons of men the wisest and the truest. These they labored with, preparing them to carry on the work of the gods, after the spiritual hierarchies themselves had withdrawn into the invisible worlds. With these specially ordained and illumined sons, they left the keys of their great wisdom, which was the knowledge of good and evil. They ordained these anointed and appointed ones to be priests or mediators between themselves, the gods, and that humanity which had not yet developed the eyes which permitted them to gaze into the face of truth and live. Overshadowed by the divine prerogative, these illumined ones founded what we now know as the ancient mysteries. These were schools of religious truths, religion being here used in its sense of implying divine wisdom. To these spiritual universities were admitted the most worthy and most capable of the sons of men. At first, these schools were publicly recognized. Great temples were built to house the priests and serve as chambers of initiation. The record of the mystical arcane was in the form of carvings, baked clay tablets, and papyrus rolls. Generation after generation was illumined by the wisdom secreted in these sacred repositories. Gradually, a separation took place among the schools of the mysteries. The zeal of the priests to spread their doctrines in many cases apparently exceeded their intelligence. As a result, many were allowed to enter the temples before they had really prepared themselves for the wisdom they were to receive. The result was that these untutored minds, slowly gaining positions of authority, became at last incapable of maintaining the institution because they were unable to contact the spiritual powers behind the material enterprise. So the mystery schools vanished. The spiritual hierarchy served through all generations by a limited number of true and devoted followers withdrew from the world, while the colossal material organizations, having no longer any contact with their divine source, wandered in circles, daily becoming more involved in the rituals and symbols which they had lost the power of interpreting. An interesting and concrete example of the deterioration of the mystery schools and their rituals is found in the children's Punch and Judy play. For hundreds of years, the frivolous of all Western nations have laughed at the strange antics of these little figures. The world has long forgotten that this play originated among the early Christian mystics, where Punch was Pontius Pilate and Judy was Judas Iscariot. The little club which Punch carries is a degeneration of the ancient scepters which were carried by Roman dignitaries in the Holy Land. It is also quite probable that the famous scene between Punch and the baby is taken from the early Christian story of the slaughter of the innocents. It is really remarkable how down through the ages, by word of mouth, by allegory and symbol, and by natural example, the truths revealed to the ancients have been perpetuated to our own day, and yet have ever been concealed from the eyes of the profane. It has been said that wisdom lies not in seeing things, but in seeing through things. For the occultist, at least, this is doubly true. During the Atlantean periods of which Plato dreamed, the work of gathering and arranging the ancient wisdom went on apace, for the people of Atlantis were the greatest exponents of concrete thought the world has ever known. The Atlanteans never fully understood the wisdom that was theirs, for even in those early times the gods had withdrawn from the mass of humanity and spoke to man only through appointed priests and oracles. The method of communication used by the spiritual powers is faithfully set out by Josephus in his description of the Ark of the Covenant and the priests who served it. This ark was an oracle, and the gods spoke to the high priest by means of the language of symbolism. From the Atlanteans, with their ancient tabernacle mysteries, we have secured nearly all that we know concerning the ancient wisdom and its mysteries. According to the sacred book, they were the keepers of the spiritual records which had been given to them by their progenitors, the serpent kings who reigned over the earth. It was these serpent kings who founded the mystery schools, which later appeared as the Egyptian and Brahman mysteries, and other forms of ancient occultism. The serpent was their symbol, for they taught man the use of the creative energy which courses through nature and his own bodies as a serpentine line of force. They were the true sons of light, and from them have descended a long line of adepts and initiates duly tried and proven according to the law. These have kept alight the divine truths through many generations of ignorance and thoughtlessness. The later Atlantean world crumbled because it wavered from the law. It forgot that nature was the ruler of all things, and in attempting to survive unnaturally, it was destroyed. Before its disintegration, however, the ancient wisdom passed into the new Aryan world, where from the heart of the lofty Himalayas, its adepts and initiates began the process of building a new people to be the living tabernacles of the gods among men. Man has not always been a material being. Eternities ago, he was a spiritual creature of radiant and glorious powers. Gradually, he assumed the coats of skins which we call bodies, and his radiance was darkened by the sheaths of clay. Little by little, he lost touch with his fathers, the sons of light, and began to wander in darkness. At the time when the third eye closed in man, during the period of the ancient Lemurian world, the human race lost contact with its invisible teachers. Gradually, even the memory of them faded out until only myths and legends remained. Mythology is the authentic record of those periods of transition when the diviner sparks were gradually assuming the bodies of mortality. But man was never left to wander alone in ignorance. When the ties connecting him to the unseen worlds were broken, certain methods were established whereby the will of the gods could be made known. To this end, a certain number of men and women were instructed how to bridge the chasm, which then separated the gods from men. The method of establishing this communication was the greatest of all the secrets of ancient occultism. This secret has been preserved for the race, for at a later time all human beings will be able to communicate directly with the gods once more. During the great interval of ages, this wisdom has been perpetuated in the mystery schools, and a few chosen disciples in each generation have been given the sacred privilege of knowing the gods. This wisdom and the power and knowledge they have gained, they in turn impart to a few chosen and beloved disciples. Thus the work is carried on. The ability of the mystery schools to communicate with the invisible worlds is the basis of their power. For all the creative hierarchies dwell in the unseen worlds, and there the disciple must go in order to consult them. The reason for this is that the human race is the only one in our scheme of things that is equipped with both a physical and a mental body. The gods, so-called, have never descended into physical substance. Consequently, having no body composed of dense chemical elements, they are incapable of manifesting here. In order to communicate with them, man must therefore learn to function consciously in his own invisible bodies. When he is capable of doing this, he can communicate with the spiritual beings who dwell in similar superphysical substances. Thus, while religion deals only with fancies, theorems, and beliefs, the initiates of the ancient wisdom go straight to the fountainhead of wisdom, and learning the will of the gods, make that will the law of their lives. The initiate does not guess, wonder, or soliloquize. He labors with facts, for he is one with the truths of nature. The secret path of spiritual illumination is the way which the planetary Logos has established that his children might learn to know of him and accomplish his ends. The Logos is surrounded by a hierarchy of superhuman beings, and also by a group of great initiates who may be called the fruitage of the human world period. These great initiates, with their divinely inspired minds, are established as mighty pillars in the house of their God. They are the supports of the temple of human progress. These great minds were called by the ancient Jewish mystics the cedars of Lebanon. These are the trees which Solomon is supposed to have cut from the forests of earth to use as the mainstays of his divine temple. From north, east, south, and west, the secret truths of these initiated minds have been gathered. The adepts and mystics of all nations have given to their disciples the fruitage of their investigations while functioning in the invisible worlds. The mysteries schools, fulfilling the ancient law, are fashioned in the pattern of nature, and we know them today as the 7 great schools of the mysteries. All these are branches of one tree which grows in the center of the garden of the Lord, watered by the 4 rivers, the wisdom of the 4 worlds. As every ray of light breaks into 7 colors when it strikes a prism, so this ancient truth, striking the prismatic body of the material world, appears in a septenary body. This body is called the 7-headed serpent, for although it speaks with 7 mouths, it has but 1 brain, 1 life, 1 origin. The priests of the mysteries were symbolized as a serpent, sometimes called Hydra. From this word we have secured our common word, hydrant. As the hydrant carries water, so through the Hydra body of the initiate pass the waters of life. He is therefore a tube or channel through which they are disseminated like water from the nozzle of a hydrant. These 7 schools, each composed of 12 initiates and their disciples, surrounding a 13th exalted brother, are the God-ordained perpetuators of the ancient wisdom, as it has come from the dawn of the world when the gods descended from the nebula of the sun and took up their dwelling place on the sacred island at the North Polar Cap. As this document is not intended for propaganda purposes, we shall not name any of these schools, but they represent the 7 planets and the 7 great paths. They represent also the 7 vital organs of the human body and the 7 vials which pour out their contents upon the world. All disciples seeking to gain knowledge concerning the laws of nature must secure that wisdom through one of these 7 channels appointed by the Infinite for the furtherance of his peculiar work. Every one of these mystery schools is invisible and unknown. They can only be found after long searching and repeated disappointment. In recognition of the dignity of these schools and the sanctity of the wisdom which they represent, this treatise has been prepared to give in a simple way some of the marvelous truths for which they stand. Every 100 years, the voice of the great school is heard, and into the world comes one to bear witness to the unseen. He speaks with the voice of wisdom, and he is overshadowed by the 7 lights. Gradually, the mystery school, the 7 branches considered as a unit, is leavening the entire loaf of human thought. Today, as never before, men are turning to search for their gods, or we should say they are rather turning away in disgust from our age of materiality, which is slowly crushing the beauty and spirituality out of life. Our materiality is destroying the souls of men. It is breaking the heart of the world. It is stifling the finer side of every nature, and something within man is revolting against this unnatural oppression. Many who have never given it thought before are now wondering what the end of it all will be, how far the human race can involve itself without bringing the entire structure of modern ethics crashing down in ruins. Within the last 50 years, thousands have become spiritual pilgrims and taken up their search for truth, seeking amid the hills and valleys of the human soul for the answer to the riddle of destiny. They are seeking for those mystic masters of wisdom known to legend but of whom history bears no record. Throughout all this searching, there is a great uncertainty, but 1 or 2 facts stand out very clearly. First, the majority of people do not know what they are looking for. If they should meet truth, they would not recognize it. The masters they seek are about them every day, but like Sir Lawnful, they journey into distant lands, seeking for those things which are upon their own doorsteps. Secondly, they would not accept wisdom if they should find it. They would all be glad to have the power that the masters have, but few would labor unselfishly and untiringly for ages to secure that power and then consecrate it unreservedly to the good of humanity. Before passing on to our next subject, let us sum up a few points to be remembered concerning the great work and its workers in the world. 1. The instinct of reverence for the unknown is implanted in all human life. It seems that even many of the higher animals must have it, for as they sit at the feet of their beloved masters, their animal souls speak through upturned eyes, filled with love and tenderness. The love of the dog for its master and the love of the disciple for his teacher are closely allied. The dog asks for nothing but kind words and will lay down its life for its master. Such is true devotion. From the savage upward, reverence and devotion to the gods form part of the moral code of all humanity. Many may deny it, but in the form of either faith, fear, or superstition it persists. 2. The maker of the great plan which we call life, the being from which we have been differentiated, has given man certain potentialities. These, when awakened to dynamic powers, will give to each the faculties whereby he may know that plan. By learning it himself and applying his wisdom, he may then reach the position where he can assist others to harmonize their lives with the same law. 3. For the purpose of disseminating this wisdom wisely among all the nations of the earth, the schools of the ancient mysteries have been established, not by the will of man, but by the gods themselves, laboring through channels chosen from the most highly evolved children of earth. 4. Having established these schools, the superior intelligences became the central invisible powers of these schools and are still in actual communication with the adepts and masters who at the present time manipulate the destinies of these secret orders. 5. All growth spiritually must take place through one of the 7 channels appointed by nature for that purpose, and at some stage in his spiritual growth, each disciple will enter the planetary path best fitted to evolve the qualities that lie dormant within himself. 6. These 7 schools, together with their branches in all parts of the earth, constitute the Great White Lodge. This is the divine institution appointed to give the ancient wisdom to our planet. It is composed of all of the initiates and adepts of the White Path and forms the invisible government of the earth. 7. The ancient wisdom contains the true and accurate knowledge of the plan whereby the gods, man, and the universe were established, are being maintained, and will later be dissolved into eternity. It is the knowledge of all things in their relation to God, nature, and themselves, and it is the only guide by which man can be shown the path he must follow if he would liberate himself from the ignorance and darkness of materiality. 8. Anyone may walk that path who will accept and live up to the obligations which the ancient wisdom places upon all who would learn the mysteries of life and death. If they will live the life which it points out, they shall know not only the doctrine which it preaches, but also the great ones who have been chosen by their own virtues to teach their younger brethren the ancient wisdom. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.